Welcome everybody. My name is Susie Smith. I am founder of Intuitive Breathwork and the Intuitive Breath Institute. I do adult trauma-informed training for breathwork and using breathwork as therapy. Trauma-informed, nervous system and emotional health coach. I help people really understand a lot more about their emotional body through my lived experience and through all of the training that I've done over the last 10 years. I run my own training school. I am part of the Global Breathwork Alliance, and also my training is recognised by the UK Breath Association. I've been on a programme on E4, bringing the breathwork community to the mainstream on a programme called The Big Celebrity Detox. Also been in an amazing book by Rebecca Seal, which is about emotions and goes really deeply into the effects of breathwork on the emotional body. And also a shamanic thing and luminous being. And I've had a lot of my work in print. So I'm an author and a writer, and I have a lot of my work on Elephant Journal. So I've got lots of strings to my bows, and I'm very passionate about bringing this work to people, mainly because I got into this through my own healing journey. It's not something I've just read in a book. It's not something I've just got a certificate for. I've actually taken myself through a very, very deep and quite a painful transformational journey. And so I feel that that's my medicine. I bring that medicine to others so others can help others. That's what we do. We pay it forward. So that's a little bit about me, so you can understand where I've come from and my history and my background. But we're going to jump into talking about the nervous system, the polyvagal theory, and I work with something called the nervous system ladder. And obviously I work with the breath, and I combine all of those things together because the way we breathe impacts the way we live. Most of you that are watching this will understand that, absolutely. But the mental, emotional and physical aspect of what we're going to dive into is probably just going to give you just a little bit more understanding at a different level, and hopefully, join some dots for some of you with regards to how we work more deeply with the breath, the body and the nervous system. So we all have a breathing pattern as individuals, our fingerprint, because it's all dependent on what is stored in our unconscious and our nervous system history. You can have two very similar people. You could even have twins. It doesn't mean that their nervous system responses and their breathing patterns will be the same, because our interpretation of life and the way that we see reality is dictated by our individual perception. So, it's really important to recognize when you're working with nervous systems and when you're working with breathing patterns, you are working so deeply with an individual history that none of this is copy and paste. It's all something that is relative to that particular person, that particular history that you have in front of you. And something I teach my students is the more lived experience you have of your nervous system and your healing journey, sometimes it makes it a lot easier to understand where others are coming from, because you go, oh yeah, I recognize that in myself. So we're going to kind of work with that premise of using this information with yourself first and foremost, and then being able to transfer that into others that you work with from a space of, recognition, because I think that's true medicine. If you think of your nervous system and its history as a ladder, this is us very gently tiptoeing into what we call the polyvagal theory, which was created by Stephen Porges. And it was created off the back of the Vietnam War veterans, because that's when they started to notice that even though they were having all of this talking therapy, they would be fine when they left the talking therapy session, but they'd walk down the street, a car would backfire, which would replicate a gun, and straight away they were back in this extreme traumatic experience. And that was where they coined the phrase post-traumatic stress disorder. So in terms of us knowing about this, it's relatively new in the fact that was around about the 60s and the 70s. And in the greater scheme of things, that is quite recent. Up until that point, we only thought we had two parts of the nervous system. And Stephen Porges started to dive deeper into all of that. And if you've ever read The Body Keeps the Score, again, that talks very much about polyvagal theory and the understanding of how this came about, and that trauma is stored in the body and not in the mind. So when we look at the nervous system as if it's a ladder, and I always say to people, just use that metaphorical ladder within the body. That visual is a really good way to ascertain where you're at any given point. And I use green at the top. And I have a phrase I say, which is calling in the green, because the green is your safe space. And that's why I like it to be the heart, the top of the ladder. The second bit is your sympathetic nervous system, which I call the yellow, and that is your solar plexus. Easy to remember because the chakra, solar plexus, is also yellow. And then the lower part of the abdomen is, again, near the root chakra. The red is your dorsal vagal, okay, the lower part of the oldest part of the nervous system, which sits at the bottom of the ladder. Now, these three need to work together. And what we forget when we're working with the nervous system, and, the breath is paramount to this, is we have ultimately the control of being able to move up and down the ladder. But problems happen when we forget that we can do that. We get stuck, usually in red or yellow. And I'm going to just take you through some more information on understanding how you can start to make that nervous system flexible and how you can move up and down the ladder. Your breath and your nervous system history directly impacts the way we feel, the way we live, the way we are, the way we interact, both on a positive and a negative. Now, I don't always like to use the term positive and negative because I believe everything just is. But for the context of what we're learning today, the positive and the negative makes it, you can understand more so where we're coming from. Okay. Now, these are just some of the things that we know impact us through the breath, through the autonomic nervous system, through the nervous system itself, and through the states that we end up stuck in, working with, moving through. So fast, shallow breathing, we know, activates the yellow, the fight or flight response. One of the reasons I use colours, again, because it's the polyvagal theory and it makes it easier, but also when I work with some of my clients in my longer programs where I take people that have got specific issues they want to work through, and especially if there's a lot of mind energy. When you work with the colours, it takes the story away. When you say to people you're in your fight or flight response, why is that? Oh, well, Sandra next door, she done this and blah, 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 and now I'm blah, blah, blah. And straight away the story comes in and they're out of the body and straight into the mind. When we use the colours, it keeps it simple. Are you regulated or dysregulated? Are you yellow or are you green? And if you're dysregulated, are you yellow or are you red? Yeah. So when you do that, you take away the story. Really, really important, because just saying a colour eliminates that whole kind of acceleration of story and mind energy. Constant fast breathing accelerates panic attacks. So we know that if we're too much in our yellow, too much fast, shallow breathing, we're going to tip over the edge into a panic attack because of the amount of adrenaline. There's no way of us releasing that emotional charge. So it's the body's shout for help. I don't really like the word attack. The body's not attacking you. It's probably more of a response. That's a much better way to look at it, is that it's a panic response to what is happening within the body. And also the other thing that is, really common, what people take for granted and don't realize is if you're under breathing, you're overthinking. And this is a big one. When I talk to people about the nervous system, being in yellow causes that under breathing because we don't have enough oxygen in the system because we're fast, shallow breathing. The brain in fight or flight response is constantly looking for the threat response, or if it's not there, it will create one, because that's how the body and the mind work. If you're in your sympathetic nervous system and you're in yellow, there is a threat. So the mind will be trying to find a solution